Hello and welcome to Money Talks. I'm joined by IB Times expert financial columnist Edmund Shing. Hi Ed.
Hello Alfred.
This week we're all going to be talking about defence spending and homeland security in the wake of the Paris attacks. Starting off looking at the Schengen Treaty, what's going to happen to Schengen, the borderless controls, in the wake of the attacks?
Well, I think in the wake of the attacks, Alfred, and the fact that obviously a lot of the bombers came from Belgium, just over the border where there is no border, you just drive straight down the motorway from Brussels to Paris. There are two ways you can go. You can either basically build an iron curtain around the whole of the Schengen area, but that clearly will mean a lot of extra spending and probably transfer of spending from countries like France to maybe countries like Greece to reinforce those borders at the exterior of Schengen. Personally, I don't think that's very likely. More likely is, I think, the reimposition of border controls within each Schengen country, effectively meaning the end of open borders and the end of Schengen.
And moving on to NATO defence spending, in recent years we've seen a cut to the spending budget, but in the wake of the attacks, do we see a reverse perhaps?
I think we will, Alfred. If you look at the 5 years between 2009 and 2014, and you take the NATO countries ex the US, they've actually cut defence spending in aggregate by $45 billion, which is an awful lot of money. It's 15% of the whole budget. Now they're only spending 1.5% of GDP on defence, whereas the NATO target is 2%. So we're 25% away. It's a long, long way away. UK, for instance, is one of the only countries who spends 2% today. Now, what does it mean? It means that everyone's going to be spending more. France in particular, but I think Germany is already committed to spending 10 billion extra because, of course, they have the refugee crisis to deal with as well. So there is going to be big spending by all the major NATO nations to get closer to that 2% going forwards.
Are there any other reasons why we would expect NATO spending to increase?
Well, I think other than the issues in Syria with ISIL, the second real issue is, of course, Russia. Now, if you take Russia, they've actually increased defence spending over the last few years as a proportion of their economy. It now stands at 5.5% of GDP. So consider NATO, 1.5%, Russia, 5.5%, and increasing, whereas NATO has been cutting. So there also is tensions, particularly given the shooting down of a Russian jet by Turkey, which is clearly going to increase the tensions between Russia and NATO as a whole. I think, again, that's a second reason why NATO needs to start spending now.
And to get to the heart of the matter then, who is set to benefit from this increase in defence spending?
Well, you've got to look at defence companies around Europe, Alfred. There are companies in France, Thales, for instance, which actually owns a lot of UK defence companies, and also Safran. In Italy, Finmeccanica. But in the UK, we have good old BAE Systems, which spends a lot of resources marketing both to the US and also to the UK and the rest of Europe. And I think they will be one of the biggest beneficiaries.
Well, thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you, Alfred.
And for our latest business coverage, go to our website, ibtimes.co.uk.